Good morning and welcome to Bates Botanical Boot Camp. Today we are discussing TropicAnnuals. So those beautiful tropical plants that you get for summer season to put by your pool, to put on your front porch. Most of them aren't going to be brought in as a house plant in the winter. We're talking hibiscus, Mandavia, some kinds of palms, all of those fun, beautiful, some flowering, some not. So we're going to discuss those plants, troubleshooting, care, what my favorite ones are for poolside. Ooh, Tyler's doing a pan out. What my favorite ones are for your porch. So let's get started. We're going to start with shade-tolerant tropicals. So these are going to be primarily ferns, alocasia, calocasia, elephant ears, things that don't primarily usually flower or have like a bright, vibrant-looking flower that's going to attract bees, hummingbirds, and butterflies. So starting with ferns, we've got 4 that we're going to discuss today, and we're going to start with sun-tolerant to more shade-tolerant. So we're going to start with Kimberly Queens. Now, these are more upright growing ferns. You'll see them in much larger planters, much larger pots. You usually can't find them very small. They just start large and go wild. Now, these can tolerate full sun. They can tolerate afternoon sun. They might need a little bit of acclimating time to get used to that level of sunshine. But if you're looking for a fern that can take, afternoon heat, sun, this is the fern for you. So again, that's going to be the Kimberly Queen fern. She can tolerate more sun than most others. And then moving on to macho fern, which is my personal favorite fern out of the 4 we're going to talk about today. This is a larger leaf fern, hence the name macho, I'm assuming. It can tolerate a little bit more sun, but it does love afternoon shade. So if you, again, got more of a sunny spot, you're going to want to go with Kimberly Queen, but macho can tolerate some sun. It can also acclimate to afternoon sun, but it's going to take a little bit longer than that Kimberly Queen. This has more of a drape than the Kimberly Queen, less than a Boston fern, but sometimes you do find these machos in hanging baskets, but I prefer mine in a planter on either side of my front door. So we've talked about Kimberly Queens, we've talked about machos. Now we're going to move on to foxtail ferns. Now I would say foxtail ferns might be the most popular fern this season. They're very hard to keep in stock. Unfortunately, I don't have any ferns in here as we have really sold down on them currently here at the nursery. So foxtail ferns are going to have a very upright growth. They kind of have an asparagus look. I could be wrong, and Tyler, correct me if I am wrong, but I believe they are in the asparagus family.
They are.
There it is.
Yeah, so if you actually see them called asparagus fern, but you're looking for the foxtail, there is a different asparagus fern that just is loose and bushy.
Yeah, there's a couple different ones. I know there's like the Ming asparagus fern, but these foxtail ferns, they're so cool. So if you haven't seen one before, they, like I said, they have an upright growth habit. They kind of look like very tall, skinny Christmas trees in a way. And they're in a nice big grouping. I've seen them here in Tennessee. People have planted them in ground. Now they're not going to come back, but they will get huge in ground. And those can adapt to some full sun as well. So they are going to need time, just like the macho, to acclimate to that much sun. But I have seen them growing in like late afternoon full sun. So like I said, that I would say is one of the most populars. We got popular. We got some in yesterday here at the nursery. So if you're looking for some, you can come on down. And then the 4th, which I would say is the most classic fern. You see them on long front porches. You see them, restaurants everywhere. They're really popular in the 70s with that burgundy look inside of Italian restaurants, the Boston fern. So this is going to be the most shade tolerant fern. It actually doesn't like to get really any direct sun. If it does get direct sun, it's going to need to be that soft morning sunlight, which is why you usually see it hanging on front porches. This is a great fern, pretty easy care. It does tend to shed a lot more than any of the other 3 ferns that I have mentioned this morning. So a little higher maintenance, but it's got that nice classic look. Perfect for a hanging basket, perfect for your front porch. If it is getting too much sun, it's going to show you signs of it. It's going to start browning and dropping more leaves. But it's also, before it starts doing that, it's going to become like a lighter green color. And that's how you can tell you need to pull it out of that sun and probably give it more water. Now, with all of these ferns, all 4 that I've talked about, they are going to be thirsty throughout the summer. You're probably going to be watering them every day, especially if they are getting a lot of sun. You might be watering them twice a day. So be aware of that if you're going with a fern. They are going to like a ton of water. So we're going to move on. But before I do to the next plant that we're going to talk about, if you have any questions at all, you can type them in the comment box and Tyler will read them out and we will both answer them for you.
I'm looking for them.
Tyler is ready.
And definitely on the At Home Show page, which is a recent addition to our webinar outlets. If you're watching us from there, leave a comment. I'll pick it up.
Perfect. And if you're wondering what that voice is, that is Tyler Blankenship, our amazing tech person here at the nursery who also does webinars and the At Home Show. Usually he has a Tyler cam, but I'm not seeing that pop up today.
No, I'm disembodied today.
Oh, that's a little bit sad.
I'm yielding the floor to you, Carrie.
You will see him on Saturday if you tune into the At Home Show, where we talk about all the plants, all the gardening, and answer all of your questions. So moving on to another shade-loving tropical. Elephant ear, alocasia, calocasia. Some of them do like full sun. While they can tolerate shade, there's lots of different varieties out there. A fun fact, calocasia, the leaves are pointed down. So when they start growing out, the leaves are going to point towards the ground. Alocasia, the leaves are going to point up. So I actually have an alocasia here in the green room with me today that we're going to pull forward.
Really quickly, Caroline, is
Yes.
the Kimberly Queen hardy?
It is
zone?
not. So none of the ferns I talked about are hardy here in our zone, which is Zone 7 in Middle Tennessee. I am going to talk about ways to overwinter all of these plants once we kind of go through just the list. So we will talk about overwintering, but unfortunately they will be taken out pretty quickly with the first big frost we get. But That is a great question. So alocasia, elephant ear. I have some on my front porch. My front porch is pretty much shaded all day. It gets a little bit of direct morning sunlight. So sometimes I put Bostons out there. If I'm feeling classic for that look, sometimes I get wild depending on the year. So this is going to be a good one if you don't have a lot of sun. Perfect porch plant. You can plant it in your yard. And we'll talk about overwintering in a little bit. It's going to grow a lot larger if you have it in ground, but then if it's not a hardy variety, you will have to dig it up if you want it to come back next year. So this is a good option for shade foliage. Some of them get really big. This one I have in front of me is a dwarf variety, so it's probably going to stay between like 2.5 to 3.5 feet tall. So it won't get super big. So it'd be the perfect plant for your small porch space. So we're going to move on to more or transition to more sun tolerant, sun loving. I wouldn't really say it's tolerant because most of these plants we're going to talk about today absolutely love the sun. But palms are something that you think would be out in the sun, full sun all day, which is not necessarily the case. Now with some palms that come into nurseries this time of year, are grown in Florida, they're going to be more outside and can tolerate a little bit more sun. But most of the palms you're going to find at garden centers, even at Home Depot, if you go there, they're going to be more of a shade tolerant palm. So if you're looking for something, again, for your front porch, a lot of palms are going to be really, really happy there with just soft morning light and indirect light throughout the day. Now, I do have a palm up to my right. I'm going to pull this. Oh, Tyler got a cam there. So this is a European windmill palm. Now this one is going to be a sun-loving palm. So here we go. We have transitioned to sun-loving tropicals. This can take full sun or partial sun. This one's also marginally hardy here in Middle Tennessee. I have seen some planted in the ground, receiving full sun throughout the day and getting pretty large. Now, no, when I say marginally hardy, it means it's not guaranteed to grow here. And you might put it in the ground, it might get, 3 years or 20 years, and we might just get a huge frost, especially late in the season, that might take it out. So you could take a chance if you want to try to plant it in ground, or it can just be an annual for you by your poolside. All right, so moving into full sun, one of our most popular flowering plants that I think probably sells the quickest here once we get our big tropical shipment in is going to be Mandavia. So I've got some in front of me, these small ones right here. You can see she's got some buds on her. She's about to really take off. And then there is a yellow one on the other side of the table that is flowering currently. So if you look at that, you can tell that hummingbirds are absolutely going to love these. So this is going to be a great attractor for hummingbirds, bees, and butterflies. Specifically the red variety, the hummingbirds are going to love that. I mean, hummingbirds love that red color, but if you can find or if you have a red Mandavia, they're going to just go wild. Now, there are large leaf Mandavias, which we are currently out of here at the nursery, so I don't have one in. But the leaves are going to be a lot less glossy than these that we have in front of us here. And they're going to be about twice as large, maybe about 3 times as large. So they're really cool. Now, these are very aggressive growers. They're going to vine. You can cut them back to keep them into bush form, but they will grow up a trellis, or I've actually seen them as a spiller, which looked kind of cool. So if it doesn't have anything to attach itself to, it'll start vining over itself. It'll create some weight and it will start spilling over that pot. Now, like I said, these are sun-loving plants, especially if you want lots of blooms on them throughout the season, which they will do. They're going to want a lot of sun. They also, they would probably love to be fertilized a few times during the summer. I usually just use a Miracle Grow, just blue water, to really boost those blooms and that growth. So if you've got some kind of trellis by your pool or on the side of your porch, this is a great option for you to grow something that's going to grow really quickly, create kind of a, sculpture-looking screen, if that's what you're going for, and it's going to have beautiful flowers throughout the summer. It's really tolerant to our heat that we're going to get here in Middle Tennessee come July. It's going to be pretty happy, but like we talked about with the ferns, you're probably going to be watering it almost every day. So our next flowering plant, maybe I will ask Tyler if he has any questions first.
I have a question.
Tyler has a question.
Do you need to tie up Mandavilla? Or Mandavia.
That's a good
to a trellis.
Question.
Or
Mandavia, Mandavilla,
itself?
people call them different ways. There's also Diplodina, or multiple ways to say that. They kind of go hand in hand. They look very similar. So as far as tying it up, when I have done installs or when I've grown it at my house, I will tie it up to start training it. But once it's kind of trained to grow up whatever you want it to grow up, it's going to just follow that pathway. Now, with some that we've gotten here at the nursery, we have some in hanging baskets, which is a great look. But I've noticed very quickly, in a matter of like a day or two after hanging them up, they've started growing up like the rafters of the greenhouse. And I've had to untangle them and bring them down. So with hanging baskets, you'd probably need to keep it cut back. And I answer a lot of questions here at the nursery about pruning, cutting your plants. Is it bad for it? Is it going to hurt the plant? No, it actually encourages new growth. It's great for the plant. So if your Mandavia gets out of control, or really any trailing plant, cutting it is always a great option. So you can cut away. But good question, Tyler. So moving on to hibiscus. Now, I'd say this is the most, or at least one of the most tropical looking plants we have here. I've got one down in front of me. Oh my gosh. It's kind of a soft baby girl pink bloomer. Look at her go. So these are great, great tropical looks. So if you have a pool and you want to add that flowering, leafy, glossy green plant that's going to grow pretty tall, not a viner, it's more of a bush, or you can train it or buy it in a standard tree form. This is going to be a good addition to your pool or your back porch, fire pit area. As long as it's getting a lot of sun, this plant is going to thrive and be really happy. Like I talked about with the Mandavia, this is one of those plants that you can fertilize throughout the summer. It'll promote new growth. Once these blooms once they're spent, like this one's about to be gone, they'll open, they'll close back up, and then they'll start to kind of turn mushy. I'll usually just remove them so the plant isn't giving energy to that already spent bud, and it will send it to those new ones that will start opening and giving you more flowers. So this is, like I said, it's a really popular one. You see them all over the place. You can get it in a bush form, which when I say that, it's just going to be low. You'll probably have to keep cutting it if you want it to stay smaller. Or you can train yours or buy one in a standard tree form. So it's going to have one stalk, or it's going to be braided all the way up and then look like a tree. Now here, unless you are overwintering yours, which again we'll talk about towards the end, you might not have time to train it into that tree form because it does take a little while. And we have probably, I don't know, I'd say 3 months of perfect weather for these plants, maybe 4, where it's going to be warm enough outside. So hibiscus, Mandavia, both beautiful, flowering, full sun, lovely plants that you're probably going to want to add to your house, to your home, or your business. So another one we're going to talk about for full sun, perfect screen. I know Tyler has some of these. Now we have hardy varieties and we have tropical varieties, bananas. So Tyler has talked a couple times on the At Home show and possibly talked about it in a webinar. He's got the Musa Baju banana, which is hardy here in Middle Tennessee. It actually spreads like crazy. It grows like crazy. It gets upwards of, I don't know, Tyler, more than 10 feet?
13 feet.
There he is.
Yep.
He does have a camera.
I turned it on. I was like,
you little liar. You surprised us all. So I know a lot of customers have come in looking for a good screen around their pool and have left with these banana trees. They take you straight to the tropics. You're on the beach. You've got a margarita in hand. You're just floating away.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned before, the wind through these banana leaves and the way that it rustles is really excellent. And the only thing you're missing is the sound of the waves crashing, really. So get yourself a wave pool in one of those and you'll be set. Yeah. Also, once they get established, they'll send up little pups, and you can dig them up against the roots of the mother stalk. And if you get a root on the little pup, you can propagate that and continue your banana conquest across your yard.
You do have a banana conquest that is happening.
I'm literally doing that right now. I'm digging up the pups off my banana and potting them up.
I saw some of your pups.
Yep. So that's a great thing to do. Also, with hibiscus, if you're looking for a hardy option for them, we do have hardy hibiscus. And they also have wonderful blooms. A little less tropical looking, but still nonetheless massive.
I like them a little bit better, the hardy hibiscus. I've got one that's almost a foot tall now. That's coming up that I planted last year. Same as these, they're going to love full sun. So banana trees. So like I said, like Tyler discussed beautifully, we do have some that are hardy here in Middle Tennessee, although they will spread. They're pretty aggressive spreaders, I'd say like 3 years in. So I have heard from some people that planted them and then they just took over. So if you've got a smaller space or you want to keep it controlled, I have heard about people kind of sinking a planter in the ground or putting up walls. Tyler, what do you have to say to that?
So when you plant it, you'll have that single stalk, right? And it looks beautiful and it's solitary and you're like, that's my little banana. But then the next year, you'll see another one pop up about 6 inches away from it. Then the next year, there will be maybe like 4 or 6, and they'll kind of be in a little cluster about a foot wide. So right now, my banana mounds, which thankfully they don't go too far, every year they kind of spread out a little bit more. So if you want to control them, you have to dig out those little pups before they get established if you want to keep it contained. But you're looking at a spread of 3 to potentially 4 feet wide of a very mature banana stand, I would say, because there's just multiple stems that keep coming up. So prepare for that if you're in a small space.
Or if you don't want to go wild with it and have it come back year to year, you can treat it as an annual or buy one of our tropical banana varieties that we have here at the nursery, which we do have a lot. We have black tie, which I think we have 2 that are, I don't know, I'd say 12 feet tall right now. They've got a cool black trunk and then huge leaves up top, a nice big canopy. Now, those are not going to be hardy here. You can bring them in the winter. I'll talk about overwintering them or keep them as house plants. You can also put them in planters. I have seen them come back, the hardy variety, come back in planters. Now it's going to be a little bit iffy whether or not they do because they are in that planter above ground. But that is an option. And like we talked about, there's the very mature one that can get upwards of 13 feet like what Tyler has, or the dwarf variety. But when we say dwarf variety, it's not going to stay about this size, which I have one right here in front of me. This one's probably going to get 6 to 8 feet tall. So it's still going to get pretty large. So if you decide to put it in a planter, which is a little bit brave, you'll want to get a large planter that can hold it and really heavy. So if the wind blows, it's not going to knock over your plant because these do break pretty easily.
They will catch the wind.
They, just like we talked about, they dance and sing in the wind.
Got a question. Do the banana trees produce bananas?
They will here, but I don't believe they're edible. Have yours produced?
Yes. So you'll get these small little finger-like bananas. They are inedible if you're planting Musa boschu, the hardy fiber banana. But the flowers are absolutely exquisite, and bees will totally love it. They'll be all up inside them. So plant it for the pollinators. Or let them go for the pollinators. You don't have to cut the flower stalk off. Just let it go. By the time, I think October, November rolls around, that first frost will definitely hit those bananas, and then you'll just see them blacken up. And oh, by the way, if you want to overwinter them, cut them back to the ground, mulch them over with 2 to 3 inches of mulch.
So we've talked about bananas now. Moving on to another green or black or sometimes red foliage plant. We're going to talk about elephant ear again. Now, like I talked about, there's some that are more shade tolerant, some that are more sun loving. A lot of them can be adapted to shade or sun. I have found that the black leaved, the darker leaved ones seem to prefer shade more than the larger, lighter green leaved. Now I've planted a Borneo giant in full sun. Those get huge, and it was really happy and actually got way bigger than I anticipated. So they can tolerate some full sun. They're not going to be as large as the banana. And like I said, there's a lot that are not hardy here. So when you're shopping for one, you'll want to read the tags, do some research, or ask questions at the garden center where you are to see if it is going to come back each year. But again, we will talk about that shortly. And then just a few more to discuss before we just move on to troubleshooting, overwintering, watering, what have you. It's going to be Oleander, which is right here on my left, and Ruellia, also called Mexican petunia, which is going to be here down in front. Now, these are both kind of bush form, beautiful flowering, full sun loving tropicals that I love both of these. Oleander, fun fact, right here, is the 7th most poisonous plant here on planet Earth. I believe. I could be mistaken, but that's what I hear.
Yowza.
I know it is very poisonous. All parts of this plant are poisonous. It usually has, or it always has, a white, pink, or deep pink bloom on it. And then it creates these seed pods that just are full of, you know, the fluffy little seeds that once the seed pod dries and opens, they're going to blow everywhere. So I had an oleander plant for about 3 years here in Tennessee, and I would bring it in and treat it as a house plant. But with my animals, I just was nervous around it all the time. So I eventually left it outside and let it freeze. It's kind of a fun experiment to do to see how long certain plants can withstand cold weather once we move into like October, November, to see if they can last. And I've actually been surprised by how long some can last. So oleander, it's beautiful. You see it a lot in Florida, in warmer states. People put it by pools, by hotels, just lining sidewalks. Like I said, it's going to be a beautiful bloomer. It gets really large, but it's not going to survive here in Tennessee. And then the Ruellia, which is down in front, usually a purple or white bloom. The one I have right here is going to be a purple bloom that hasn't quite opened. It's a pretty aggressive grower. I say pretty aggressive. I would say very, maybe the most aggressive grower of anything I have on this table. It's going to shoot out little shoots from the ground if you plant it in ground or in the pot. It also just grows like a weed because, I mean, anything can be a weed if you don't want it. And you can just cut it back to keep it kind of tame and whatever shape you want it to be in. Now, I haven't had luck with it, but I have heard from some of our customers here at the nursery that they have planted this in ground here and it has come back year to year. So if you wanted to give it a shot, you could try. Again, just like the European windmill palm, which we have right here, it's not going to be guaranteed to come back every year. So those, both Oleander and the Ruellia, have a really similar look, similar needs for growth and to be happy. Ruellia, marginally hardy here. I say hardy. I don't even really want to use that word. You might have luck with getting it to come back. I also hear that it reseeds. Oleander, no chance. Not going to survive outside here. And then...
Maybe that's a good thing.
Huh?
Maybe that's a good thing.
So we don't poison everything?
Yes.
Yeah. I know when I had it inside, I was like, oh gosh, I'm going to end up eating it, or my husband or my dog. So
deer.
Or the deer. Yeah. I love poisonous plants. Like there's just something about them. My favorite poisonous plant, which I've talked about in a webinar before, is Brugmansia, angel trumpet. Gorgeous night flowering plant. I love it so much. I actually have it growing in my yard. So right over here, another purple blooming tropical plant, Duranta. So this, just like we talked about with the hibiscus, it's unfortunately not really blooming right now. It's also called purple
There's a bloom
showers.
in the front right here.
Do you see one?
Yeah, in the front.
Oh, I see it.
Yeah.
We'll shake her. I can't quite reach her.
No.
So this one can be bush form, tree form. It would look great by a pool, great by your porch. Love sun, is going to attract a lot of butterflies. And I can't say enough about good things about this one. She's just really, really lovely. But with that loveliness comes aphids that absolutely love this plant. And we will talk about pests on all of these plants shortly once I finish our plant tour. And lastly, we have canna, which, similar to banana, people see canna a lot, think it's a banana. Now this one is hardy here. I have planted it, which I wouldn't say was a mistake. Now I think it was a mistake because it did take over. But these have usually, I say usually, they've got all different colors: pink, red, white, orange, variegated, what have you. Pretty much any color bloom. They're gorgeous. They'll get tall, just like the bananas that we talked about. They will spread really quickly. I'm about to dig all mine up and bring them into Bates to give to people who work here, because I'm done with mine. Japanese beetle love these. That's my biggest problem with them, is every year, once the bloom spike starts shooting up, I get so excited. But as soon as those blooms open, Japanese beetle are all over it, and I don't really get to enjoy it for very long. So if you want to work with pest control, or if you don't really have a Japanese beetle problem, this could be a great plant for you. All right, so I'm going to talk about my favorite for poolside plants: hibiscus, banana, mandavia. They're a great little trio. They like full sun. Most pools are in full sun because it's nice to be swimming in the sun. They're going to look great. They're going to float you off to a tropical island. My favorite for a cozy covered front porch are going to be macho ferns, Duranta, if you've got a little sunny spot. And I like to keep it in a bush form because it'll kind of spill over a little bit once those blooms happen with the weight of those flowers. And palms. Palms for me are really low care. You have to water them a little bit less than everything else. And they can be happy not getting a whole lot of sun at all. All right. So we're going to talk about trying to overwinter these plants. So your best option with a lot of them is going to be forcing them into dormancy. So the best ones to let go dormant are going to be bananas and elephant ears in this method that I'm going to tell you about. I will usually take them out of the pot, bring the bulb up, cut back any of the leaves, any of the foliage, any of the stalk, let that bulb dry out, and then I put it usually in a paper bag or wrapped in newspaper in a dark, dry spot through the winter, and then I replant it in the spring, kind of late spring once it really warms up outside, and it's going to grow again. Now with the hardy banana, hardy alocasia, some, that might be marginally hardy, you can mulch over like Tyler discussed. I'll usually wait until the first frost kind of takes the leaves down, chop it, and then kind of heavily mulch over to protect it, and it should come back the following year. So those are two great ones that you can let that bulb go dormant, bring it inside. Or if it's a hardy variety, keep it in ground. Now, there are some that you can force dormancy on. You're not going to really cut it back. Hibiscus and ferns. So with those two, like if you don't have enough space, you don't want to keep it as a house plant, but it can be pretty pricey to buy it new year to year. You can let it go dormant and keep it in your garage. Now with that, you're going to want to start cutting back watering once temperatures at night stay like in the 50s. So start cutting back watering. You're going to see leaf loss. The leaves are going to start to probably turn yellow and drop, which is totally normal, totally natural. It's what we want. That plant is going dormant. You can place it in a garage. It doesn't really need a ton of sunlight, and you're going to want to water sparingly. Now, you're not going to want to let it fully dry out and sit there bone dry for all of winter because you'll probably lose it. But let the soil dry and then sparingly water it so it doesn't sit bone dry for a really long time. My mom's olive tree this year that she brought inside, and I've had a lot of questions about that. That is one that a lot of times in the winter will lose all of its leaves and it looks dead. So that's probably going to happen to your hibiscus. But once you get it outside, fertilize it, start watering it, get it into some sunshine, you'll really be surprised at how quickly those leaves are going to start pushing out and how healthy your plant's going to look. It's one of my favorite things to do with a lot of my house plants is to remove all of the leaves and cut it back. And then the way it flushes back out, how quickly it flushes back out, and how much healthier it is really surprising. But we are not talking about houseplants today. So those two are ones that you can force dormancy on. Mexican petunia, ruellia is going to be a little bit harder. You can always try to force dormancy on any of these. Some are easier than others. With the ruellia, I suggest just taking cuttings. It's really easy to propagate. Cut the plant, remove the leaves from the lower part of the stem, place it in water, and it's going to root. And then by the time you're ready to put that outside next year, you're going to have a big, nice, full plant. And if you take a lot of cuttings, you could have like 30 of them and just go wild. So that's going to be a good one. Oleander, it can kind of sit dormant just like the hibiscus and the ferns. It's not going to be quite as hardy with that dormancy, but you do stand a chance with it. Now, Mandavia, you're going to have to let it go dormant in a different way. I have read on it more than actually done it. I haven't actually tried to overwinter a Mandavia. Most articles, most books that I've read say just to try to keep it as a house plant and cut it back. But I have read some interesting things on really drenching it with water, soaking the soil in the pot, cutting it back to about 10 inches from the soil line, and then keeping it in a room that stays at least 50 degrees and gets sun, and continuously watering it. And it'll start pushing new growth once you have it inside. So it's basically bringing it in as a house plant, but it's just cutting it back and then letting it start to flush back out. Now, with talking about forcing dormancy on all of these plants, you will want to keep them at least 50 degrees. So if you're putting your hibiscus, your ferns in your garage, you're probably going to want to have a space heater, at least for those really, really cold winter nights, so it doesn't get down into freezing temperatures inside of your garage. I think that is all of the dormancy talk. Do we have any questions?
No, we don't, but I'm just going to encourage anybody who has questions to please submit them now as we're kind of getting closer to the end of the webinar.
Oh, no. Okay, so let's talk about troubleshooting. I mentioned aphids earlier. I would say with tropicals, especially flowering tropicals, aphids are probably the most problematic pest you're going to face. So these are going to be kind of like cream colored, green, black. I've seen reddish colored ones. They're these little bugs that like to cluster at the new growth of the plant. They're pretty easy to see once you have an infestation. Like I said, you'll see it at the new growth. With hibiscus, they'll be all over the buds and it's really annoying. Duranta, I've seen them just cover the stem, cover the leaves, and basically smother out any of the buds that are about to open. This can cause like mutations in the new growth where the leaves are going to look different. I can't think of the word, but they're going to look very different than the other leaves. They'll be kind of warped. They might be like ripply looking. Some people are like, oh, wow, that leaf looks so fancy. Not the case. It's a sign of a pest. It's a sign that the plant is sick. So with aphids, what I will usually do is take a hose, like put my finger on it, or if you have a sprayer, to get some pressure, not too much pressure because you don't want to injure your plant. I will tip the plant on its side, like so. Take the hose and spray off all the aphids, get in the crevices underneath the underside of the leaves, spray the aphids off, and then I'll usually give it a nice spray down with neem oil or insecticidal soap. Now, insecticidal soap is probably going to be a little bit better to use this time of year because you don't stand the chance of burning your leaves as much with insecticidal soap. Once you treat your plant with either of those, I'll usually, if you're able to, if it's not too big, I'll get it out of the sun while that oil kind of dries out. So like I said, so it doesn't burn the plant. Now, if you have a big problem with aphids, you can always go with a more chemical control or a systemic control. But blasting them off with water and treating them with neem sometimes just nips the problem and takes care of it. So spider mites are going to be another problem that you're going to have primarily with palms. I've seen it a lot on hibiscus. Oleander has gotten it. That's going to be these little tiny spiders, basically. And you'll notice some webbing. Your leaves will start to look sickly and start to turn yellow. And that's a sure sign that you have a pretty big infestation. With that, neem oil, for me, usually takes care of it. I will spray my plant down with neem oil and wipe down both sides of the leaves and the stalks. Should take care of it. You might want to keep checking it. They also really love alocasia. So alocasia, hibiscus, and now I'm just drawing a blank on the other one I said. Tyler, do you remember?
I'm sorry. I'm scanning for questions.
Tyler's scanning for questions over there. But spider mites, they can get on anything. They can get on indoor plants. They can get on outdoor plants. They're annoying. They're not super hard to treat. They're a little bit harder to see and before like they've taken over. So with aphids, you'll notice the bugs kind of one by one start to come onto your plant. Again, they usually meet up at the new growth. With spider mites, they're going to be on the underside of the leaves. A lot of the time, my lemon tree gets them all the time, and it's so annoying. Sometimes on the top of the leaves. But like I said, you might not know you have a problem until you start seeing discoloration of your leaves. Now, talking about discoloration on those leaves. With a lot of these plants, especially hibiscus, we didn't talk about gardenia, but this happens with that as well. Some of the older leaves will start to turn yellow and drop off. That's going to be natural with your plants. That doesn't necessarily mean you have a pest. It just happens as the plant matures and grows up. It also can be a sign of nutrient deficiency. With gardenia, it's usually magnesium, so you can add like Epsom salt to your plant or get a fertilizer with a higher magnesium count. But like I talked about, it's always a good idea to fertilize, especially your flowering plants throughout active growing season. If you decide to work on them being dormant through the winter, you're not going to need to fertilize them, hence dormant. You want it to be dormant. You don't want it to be pushing new growth, so you're not going to need to fertilize it. And then lastly, we're just going to talk about cleaning and pruning your plants. So like I talked about when we were talking about the Mandavia vining, cutting back plants is not a bad thing. It's not going to hurt your plant. It's actually going to promote new and interesting growth. So if your plant starts to get a little out of control, if the Mandavia starts vining, if your Ruellia starts getting way too tall and floppy, you can cut those back. Or if you get pest problems and it's made those leaves ugly, you've treated the plant, but those leaves are not going to turn back to their original state, you can remove those leaves. It's always a good idea to remove any dead, any diseased, any bad looking foliage or flowers, because it's not going to spread to the plants. It's also going to make it happy and healthier. All right. Do we have any questions?
We did just get asked what our grow zone is. I answered that on the Bates Facebook page, but it's zone 7A. And that covers a pretty wide swath kind of through the north southern part of the country. And then, if you live further south than here, we're going to get into 7B, 8A, and 8B. So some things, there's like a kind of a threshold between like 8 and 9 that are too cold. Our zone is too cold for. And that would be the case for some of these tropicals.
Yes. And the ones that I've talked about that are marginally hardy, like the Ruellia, the palms, those are going to do a little bit better if you live like south of Nashville. So say Franklin, I think Spring Hill, those places. And if you do want to try to plant it in the ground and see if it does come back year to year, you'll want to keep it protected. So plant it fairly close to your house on a south-facing side. So it's going to get plenty of light and protection from that cold winter wind. But I think that's all I have to talk about. Just to wrap it up, we talked about TropicAnnuals. So like I said, these are going to be tropical plants that are grown primarily for just the summer season, at least here in Middle Tennessee. You can bring them inside in the winter, treat them as houseplants. You can let them die. There's not a problem with that. Just know it's going to get a little bit pricey from year to year as you keep buying the same plant. Or you can force dormancy and let them go dormant. Just keep them protected. Keep them in 50-degree heat, temperature, and they should come back the next season. There are some that are marginally hardy. We've got cannas that are hardy here. Musa Baju bananas that are definitely hardy here, Mexican petunia, and windmill palm marginally hardy. But thank you guys for coming to Bates Botanical Boot Camp, TropicAnnuals, and there is Tyler on the Tyler cam.
Yeah, I'm just jumping in. So Caroline has also done some excellent other webinars on medicinal plants, choosing the right pot or container, as well as a bunch of houseplant webinars, overwintering, and then bringing your houseplants out for summer. All of those are archived on our YouTube page and on the Bates Nursery website. There's a tab on the Bates Nursery website called Blogs, where you can click and find our webinar archive. That occasionally has some accompanying text that will assist you, like some names of some of the plants that are mentioned. And we are continuing to do this series as well. Next week, we'll have new plant varieties for 2022 with Mr. Brent Grunfeld.
Yay!
So we're excited to have Mandavia on board here and digging into the new things that are happening over there. The following week, we're going to have How to Water Your Landscape with Ben Trest. So Ben will take us through, as we also are getting hotter, especially next week. This time of year, watering is a big thing, and we talked about that with some of these containerized annual tropicals too. So stick around for that. And thank you for attending our webinars, and we'll hope to see you in future ones. So Caroline, take it away.
All right. Thank you, guys. If you have any follow-up questions, you can always put them in the comment box, and we will get to you. Also, keep your eyes peeled for our No Down Q&A that comes out on Saturday, and we answer throughout the week. Seems like Tyler has one more thing to say.
Well, we got a couple last-minute questions here. So Alice asked, will gardenia grow well here? Frostproof is the variety I just bought.
That is, I think it is marginally hardy.
It is.
Here. I've never tried to grow it. I know we've had some customers try to grow it. Some have good luck with it. Some don't. Tyler, do you know much about that one? I've dealt mostly with the tropical and bringing it inside and putting it out.
Gardenia is definitely marginal, and us at our nursery, we don't particularly warranty this plant. So that in a nutshell says that we can't guarantee that this plant will survive winters here continually. You can plant it in a sheltered location, or either near a group of other larger plants that can shelter it from harsh, colder northwesterly winds. You can also plant it up against a home, and that helps shield it as well. The warmth from the home released at night will kind of help keep the temperatures locally, at least around the area, warmer. But that's still not a guarantee. So you might have to cover them if you love it, cover it in that case. That's the best I can offer. But they do well here during the summer.
They do great here during the summer, and they smell amazing. Like I said, they like a lot of magnesium, so there's that. But yeah, the frost proof is the marginally hardy one. We do have the tropical variety here as well. So if you come here to get one that is possibly hardy, talk to one of the Bates employees or, make sure you check the tag and it will let you know if it is hardy-ish here and what zones or temperatures.
And Caroline, do we have any webinars on home greenhouse care or growing? We've talked about overwintering.
We've talked about overwintering. We don't have any necessarily on home greenhouse.
We do have one on grow lights, though.
Yeah, we have one on grow lights. We don't have one on greenhouses. So I'm assuming you're talking about a structure outside your home, which would be a great one to cover.
Mm-hmm. We need to find one of us with one. Unfortunately, one of our webinar teachers who did have one moved away, so we can't use her as a great resource anymore. But we will work on that. So thank you.
I have had one, and I've been building another one, but yeah, there's lots of different kinds. There's windows, there's little pop-up ones that I've used before. So yeah, we will get on that. And were there any more questions?
I think we are done now.
All right. Well, again, thank you guys for joining us, for tuning in. Check the Bates Botanical Bootcamp for upcoming webinars. You can always send requests for things that you'd like to see covered. And then again, check our stories on Friday for our No Down sticker, where you can ask all your home and gardening questions that we will then answer on the At Home Show on Saturday morning, 8 a.m. Central Time, and then short form answers in our stories midweek. All right. Thank you guys.